Hello, everyone, and welcome to this YouTube live session on how to analyze your ESR. I want to thank everyone for joining me today, and also want to thank GMAT Club for hosting this session for the benefit of the audience over here. My name is Rajat Sidana. I'm one of the co-founders of EGMAT, and I'm going to be your main host today. Also with me, I have Payal Tandon, who's the other co-founder of EGMAT. So let's just make sure that the setup is fine and you guys can hear me. Select yes in the chat pod if you guys can hear me. And I can see my webcam's a bit off-centered, so let me actually just make sure that it's centered properly so you guys will see a bit of a disruption, not a whole lot. But other than that, I want to make sure everything's... Now, this is much better. All right, the audio is clear. That's wonderful. With that, let me actually start sharing my screen. And all right, you guys should be able to see my screen. You should be able to see the presentation that says, how do you analyze your ESR? Let's just make sure everything's working fine. All right. So my goal with this session today is to help each one of you do two things. One is understand why you've received a certain GMAT score, and then to help you figure out how to create a plan to reach your target GMAT score. A major chunk of my presentation would be focused on this part, which is to help you understand why you received a certain GMAT score, because there are lots of misconceptions when it comes to how do you analyze an ESR. And I'm going to talk about some of those misconceptions and dispel those. Why? Because, hey, bad inferences lead to bad planning. Bad planning leads to you not getting to your target GMAT score. All right. With that, let's move forward. And just to really lay a foundation to the webinar today, here are some excerpts that I see on GMAT Club. Here's an excerpt from a student who says, "Hi, hope all is well. I need some guidance from fellow forum members. I wrote the exam today and I scored a 610 with a Q47 and a V27. He says, the person said, I completed 70% of the course and still managed to score. This is about quant. The only challenge during quant section for me was timing." So the thing that I see most often when it comes to people, analyzing their GMAT attempt and really attributing a cause to what their score was is timing. And they really say, hey, only if I had 5 more minutes, I would have done much better. Now, for those of you who know the GMAT, who know the quant aspect, quant section of the GMAT, you know a score of Q47 and a score of Q50, they are very, very different scores. It's not just a matter of 5 minutes. It's actually a matter of ability, and which is something which I'm going to really talk about. So I'm going to talk about when you take an exam, when is it that your scores limited by your ability to answer questions, and when is it that your score is limited by the fact that you ran out of time. And making that judgment is really important because it defines how you prepare for that next attempt. All right. Here's another excerpt, and then I want you to start looking at it right from here, which is this person scored a V28, got an overall score of 600. This is actually something that was posted, I think, yesterday or today. And essentially what this person was getting in her mocks was a verbal score of 41, even a verbal score of 44. And just to set some context over here, let me actually pull the screen down. A V44 is 98th percentile. A V28 is 50th percentile on GMAT verbal. And this person has been saying, I've been doing all my GMAT preparation using official resources since I don't believe in that any other platform is able to make the quality of questions tested on the GMAT. I was also under the impression that GMAT prep score is a close estimate, is the closest estimate of my performance. Okay, so this person was scoring a V41 in her mocks, got it to a V28. And again, one of the things that she's blaming is screw up my time management a bit, and I had to rush to the last quarter of verbal. Now, one thing that I'm going to prove is time management will not be responsible for this kind of decline in scores. It does not work that way. The GMAT is a beautifully designed test. It's designed to reduce that impact of time management to a good degree. And the problem with this is when something like this happens, what you do is you stop believing in the official material. you actually start believing blaming on time management, and you focus on answering questions quickly, which again does much more harm than good. So we're going to look at when you draw inferences. And the worst thing about this is when you go on forum, people really say, okay, try and answer questions quickly. They actually add fuel to fire, which absolutely is the wrong inference. And to really just set some context to all of this, let me just tell you a bit about EGMAT as an organization and how we study the test. So we are a company, we're about 35 people. So when you look at the context of various test prep companies, what you're going to find is that there are companies that have about 5 people. There are companies that have about 100 folks working for them. At EGMAT, we're about 35 people. The difference really is that each one of us works full-time. So when you look at companies such as Manhattan or Veritas, you may have 100 folks on their payroll. Only 10 to 15 of them, or only a fraction of those, work full-time. Everyone else is as a service resource, is a contractor resource. And the reason why this is important is those people don't do R&D. Those people don't study the test. Those people probably conduct classes. At EGMAT, we study the test, and so because a lot of the things that I'm going to talk about would be contrary to what you believe, so I just want to give you this history to set some context up. So we've been in the business since the year 2010. We actually officially launched our first product in August of 2010. In the year 2013, we launched what we call as a verbal workshop. This was the first ever GMAT product that was launched with the concept of ability. Now, I'm just going to talk about GMAT scoring in this context, not about some of the other innovations that we did. Now, this was a year before GMAT even announced the word in enhanced score report, where they mention ability. They validated that concept of ability, that GMAT really does measure ability. We announced that a year before that, just by analyzing the various score reports and then the very limited set of data points that were available to us. Then the year 2015, we launched a product called GMAT Planner. And what we proved with that product was that there's 99%, not 90%, not 80%, but 99% correlation between your ability scores and your GMAT scores, which means your ability scores account for 99% of the score on the GMAT. And this tool allowed each and every individual to create your own study plan. Then in the year 2016, we launched our Scholarinium platform, which included the concept of ability quizzes. It's till date, it's the only platform that has ability quizzes. It is the highest rated assessment tool on GMAT Club of any assessment tool that has 50 or more reviews. In the year 2018, GMAT launched their enhanced ESR, or what I call as ESR 3.0. In the year 2019, we launched GMAT Planner 2.0, which is an AI-driven tool that allows each and every one of you to create your study plan. And in the last 7 months, we've had upwards of 15,000 study plans created. Each one of these study plans is unique, and it takes about 7 minutes to create that. And then in March of this year, we launched Sigma X mocks, which are the industry's only mock tests that provide, that are built on ability engines that provide analysis that is better than what any ESR can provide. And we also launched the next generation of the same Scholarinium platform in May of this year, just to really tell you how much we study the tests so far. So with regards to the agenda, I'm going to talk about 3 questions that every ESR should answer. What are the 3 questions that you should ask your enhanced score report? The second piece is, we're going to talk about just a bit of background about the GMAT. I'm going to take about 5 minutes to do that. Then we're going to look at the anatomy of your ESR. And then we're going to go from there to ESR and study plans as to, we're going to look at a few successful case studies. We're going to look at ESRs where your score has been limited by ability. We're going to look at an ESR where your score is, where time has limited, or timing, the lack thereof, has limited your score. And then we're going to talk about, how do you prepare yourself for the test? How do you use the data from mock tests to build your next improvement plan? Why? Because essentially, even when you take the actual GMAT, get the ESR, that's what you want to do. You want to attribute causality, you want to build an improvement plan. Okay. Yes, Sanket, you can get your ESR from your canceled score. So, so just as a pulse check, how many of you are retakers over here? Select, say yes if you're a retaker. All right, Pyle, if you could add the question. The question is how many of you are retakers? Select yes if you are, or rather type yes if you are. I'm sorry, there's no way to select. All right, many of you, perfect. So what are the three questions that an ESR and every ESR should answer? Here are the three questions. The first thing, and the biggest question that people have is the score that I got in my ESR a fair representation of my ability? Is it a fair representation of my prep level? The second question is, when it comes to timing, how much did timing have an impact on my score? There should be a question mark over here. And then the third question is, where should I focus my energy moving forward? Okay, and how should I study to get to my GMAT score? And this third question for me is the outcome of one and two. Why? Because essentially improvement is all that matters. Your score is what your score is. In 1 in 1,000 cases would the GMAT change your score. I've seen that happen, but not very often. But what matters is where do you go from where you currently are. And just as a pulse, are these the questions that you guys ask when it comes to looking at your ESR? Is this score a fair representation of my ability? What impact did timing have, and how should I prepare next? At a very high level, I'm sure as you go down, you have more questions too. But at a very high level, these are the questions. One of the other things that I want to mention is a lot of people really think, should I get an ESR or not? And just one judgment that I have is that the ESR is a gold mine of information. You should get it. And the reason why I say that is because there's a lot of things that people really say, hey, ESR is another money mining tool for GMAT. ESR doesn't provide a ton of value. I mean, you see one of these forum posts says that. A lot of the stuff that is there in this forum post is factually correct, but the conclusions that are drawn based on that factual information is absolutely incorrect. The ESR is a gold mine, and we're going to really see that through case studies in this session. Before we get to those case studies, I want to make sure you understand how's your GMAT score made up? What's the makeup of your GMAT score? And the reason why it's important is because if you don't understand this, it'd be very difficult for you to infer information from your ESR. So we're going to focus on your quant and verbal scores or that score out of 800 or your quant and verbal scores out of 60. We're not going to focus on your IR, your AWA score, or any other piece. So your score of 800 is divided into your quant and verbal scores out of 60. Those quant and verbal scores are divided into, on the quant side, 2 abilities, which are out of 60 as well as out of 100. And on the verbal side, you have 3 abilities, SC, CR, and RC, which are out of 60 and out of 100. Okay, so really, really important over here. This is out of 60 or 100. This is out of 60 or 100. This one is out of 800 or 100. What you're going to really see is that reference to 100 is a common denominator across this. Essentially, a combination of these ability numbers over here lead to this quant score. A combination of these ability numbers over here leads to this verbal score, and a certain set of combination of these leads to that score out of 800. So it's as simple as that. But the only takeaway that I want you to have is these abilities are the ones that matter, because this is a consequence, this is a consequence. These two, you don't plan for them. You study for this, you get this, you get this. Okay. So how does scoring work on the GMAT? You have 5 independent ability engines. This is something that we have determined based on our research, and these engines calculate these key abilities independently, and these are the abilities over here. And the test combines these abilities to calculate these scores out of 60, and then it combines this score to calculate the score out of 800. And why do we say that these abilities are independent? And their independence is a really key thing. Why? Because it allows you to focus and study one subsection independent of the other. Okay, so as I said, we study the GMAT really deeply. We were really we actually are researchers in many ways. So what we did was we took about 1,000 ESRs, We looked at those ability numbers. We did a regression plot. And what we found was that the ability scores account for your GMAT score with an R square, which is the quality of prediction, to up to 99%. And that standard error was about 10 points on a scale of 800. What you see over here with these blue dots is a score estimate, and this line over here is the actual GMAT score. That's how close this is. Okay. Now, by definition, if something has really good regression representation, the individual subsection, the individual coefficients, the individual elements or dependent variables, as they are called, are independent of each other. So the abilities as SCCR, RC, arithmetic, algebra, by definition, they are independent. So that's one proof that proves that those engines are independent. The second proof is a lot of the work that GMAT Club did with their what-if analysis, where they took the earlier version of GMAT prep software, not the ones that you guys use, but there used to be a version prior to this that used to give us these insights, where what they did was they said, I'm going to mess up my CR and RC. This analysis is available as open source information on GMAT Club. It's called what-if analysis. And essentially, they were able to get to 96th percentile in SC, even though they messed their CR and RC completely, which by definition is the definition of independence. They're able to replicate that on CR. They could get the highest score possible in CR, even though they got the worst scores on SC and RC, and similarly on RC as well. Again, showing independence, okay, or indicating independence, a very strong indication, by the way. And the third piece is actual ESRs. I mean, we have thousands and thousands of ESRs, and there are many instances where you see, hey, someone scored 0 percentile in RC or SC, yet they've been able to get really good percentile abilities in other subsections, again indicating independence. If your performance in RC did have an impact on CR or SC, you wouldn't have been able to get that 87 percentile when you messed up RC. Okay, so really, really important piece over here that your GMAT scores composed of your subsectional abilities. Your abilities are independent. So let's kind of look at an anatomy of what your ESR is. Any questions so far, by the way? All right. Let's just go here. Okay, this is a link by the GMAT. It's probably the best place to go to understand what an ESR is. And I want to open this link in another browser. Why? Because it allows me to annotate on it. Let's just open this link over here. And again, what you see over here is your score out of 800. Let me just annotate. And your score out of 800 is divided into your verbal, your score, as well as your quant score. You also get your AW and other scores. I'm not going to focus on it. And you get some timing information. That part, relevant, not as relevant with regards to figuring out why you faltered. These scores are relevant because it tells you how much you scored on verbal. This percentile is important because it tells you, compared to other test takers, how you did. Now, what's more important is when you go into each of the subsections over here. And I'm going to just minimize all of this. And essentially, what you see over here is, let's see, can I annotate? Let's kind of, yeah. What you see is there are three aspects to it. One is, again, I'm in the verbal part. You see the overall verbal score. The second is you see this performance by subsection. I'm going to expand that. It probably is the most important data point. Okay. Performance progression. Because why? Because this tells you what your abilities are. It tells you where should you be focusing on. Performance progression. Really important. Why? Because it helps you justify whether this ability that is given over here, is that the correct number or not. So that's something which is, I'd say important, because it helps you justify that score. And this performance by fundamental skills, if you have a score which is around that 70th percentile, then it becomes important. Why? Because it tells you which are the areas. It gives you another level of analysis as to which are the areas that you need to focus on. But if your score is less than 70th percentile, I won't pay a lot of heed to it. So let's kind of go a bit more deeply into all of this. But at a very high level, always when you get your ESR, do this, minimize this. So now let's go into all of this over here. Performance by subsection. Now, this guy got a V34. What do you infer from this? What do you infer from these subsectional rankings? What do you infer from these subsectional rankings? Just look at these three numbers and tell me. Again, there's a bit of delay, so you may see that I'm muted. SC is weak. Yes, good. What else do you infer? The second piece that you need, CR is really good. The guy probably has nailed CR. He doesn't need to study. He doesn't need to build any more concepts. All he needs to do is maintain this performance. So if I were to really just look at this data point, and these three data points are probably the most powerful set of data points that you need to really get to, what I would really say from here is that when it comes to CR, I need to maintain my performance. And let me just zoom it in. Over here, I need to improve. I already have a foundation I need to improve. And then here, I need to build. The guy may have started concepts, but the very fact that it's 45th percentile means the person needs to build his ability. Okay. That's how I would infer this. Not just the number, but what does that number represent? If you're at that 91st percentile, you're really good. You pretty much can answer a majority of the hard questions that the test can throw at you. You need to maintain your performance, maybe look at your mistakes, but you don't need to go back to studying concepts. You don't need to learn methods. You probably need to really just worry about nuances and make sure that you maintain this. If you're at that 68th percentile, you know the concepts, you know most of the methods. You need to practice relevant questions. You need to look at your mistakes and learn from it. But if you are over here, you actually don't know the methods really well. You may know a decent number of concepts, a good number of concepts, but you don't know the methods. Okay. Now, I'll go into timing, but I don't like to go into this a whole lot. But what do you get from this over here? And as Payal said, thank you. Stage 3 in CR, and we're going to talk about the stages of learning, stage 2 in RC and stage 1 in SC. That's the perfect way to say it. These stages are what we call as stages of learning. What do you infer from this over here? Or can you infer anything from this? What do you infer from the block diagram? Last section is bad. We have to figure out why that is bad when this was really good. Okay, this was pretty good. I wouldn't say really good. I would say, but this is pretty good. 71% accuracy in each of the blocks is really good. All right, let's see. Is it time management? Is it something else? As we go down, that's where we look at these parts over here. And we really say, okay, where does timing start to impact? Only in the last block. Only in the last block is when timing started to impact. All right. So if I were to ask you to make a guess, how many points do you think this guy got a V34? Remember, he had a V34. So he had a V34. So if he had 5 more minutes, what do you think he would have scored? Best guess. If he had 5 more minutes, what do you think he would have scored? So if he had 5 more minutes, big question. And the reason why this question is really important is to really say, hey, am I limited by time? And if the answer is yes, you've determined it's yes, then to what extent? Okay, V37, V38, V40. All right. Let's get a few more guesses. What would this guy have scored had he gotten, if he gave him 5 more minutes? Okay, V37. All right. Okay, if I were to guess, having looked at these many ESRs, and the reason why this is really important is when it comes to a computer adaptive test, you have to take into account all of this context looking back. This guy got ample time in each of the first 3 blocks, which means that the data from the first 3 blocks, that data is a really good representation of his ability. Now, in the last block, he messed up. This is where he messed up over here. And what I would look at purely is to what extent did this orange line or whatever green colored line go down. And when I look at this, I would say 2 to 3 points at the most, no more than that. And let me see if I can reduce the size over here. I would say probably 2 points, at the most 3 points. So my best guess would be V36. My extreme would be V37. This guy is definitely not a V40 guy. So yes, his attempt was timing limited, but not to that extent. He wouldn't have gotten V40 even if he had 5 more minutes. Okay, so that's something which is, I mean, 2 points is all I would give over here, just because these numbers till this point are fairly representative of his ability. But again, at a very high level, what I want you to remember is, in terms of the anatomy of the ESR, these ability numbers matter. And even those 5 minutes don't change that recommendation that, hey, this guy needs to really build his ability in sentence correction. This recommendation is still the same. And the fact that this guy needs to improve over here. All right. So that's kind of just a very high, at a very high level, the anatomy of the ESR. Now, just to revise, how should you look at the ESR? In the section performance by subsection, that's very useful. Why? Because it tells you where you faltered, it tells you why you faltered. It builds that foundation of that improvement plan with regards to stages of learning. Performance progression, it's very useful. Why? Because it explains why you received a certain score. The case that we read, the example ESR that we looked at, I will tell you, if this were your ESR, 9 out of 10 people would say, man, if I had 5 more minutes, I would have gotten a V40. And they would focus on their timing, because they would really say timing is where I'm lacking. They would not look at that ability score over here and say that in SC, I need to get my fundamentals right. They wouldn't look at it from that lens. And is that true? That's what you guys do, right? You really, timing is something which is a magnet which gets you and really says, the moment you see timing has some sort of an impact, you start working on timing, you forget the ability aspect in SC. And for that particular person who got 47 percentile ability in SC, he got that not because of the last block. He got that because of the first 3 blocks. Am I correct? And then the fundamental skills over here, they're useful only at high scores, or I would say high subsectional abilities. For SC, I wouldn't bother about them. For RC, they are really, really useful. Why? Because he was at about 70th percentile ability over there in RC. Okay, now let's have a bit more fun over here. So this is something, most of it I was telling you and you guys were We're looking at it. Now we're going to go into stuff where I'm going to ask you things. And where is my whiteboard? Well, I have a lot of stuff open. Let's escape, discard, and okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to run some case studies over here. And we're going to start with 2 attempts. What you see over here are 2 ESRs. Let's make sure we get this centered around over here. What you see is 2 ESRs named A and B, and that's why I've classified them as, sorry about that, classified them as A and B over here. Let's see. And what I want you to tell me is, this is on the verbal side of things. At the bottom, you see the number of mistakes that a student has made in each and every block. I want you to guess what verbal score did A get, what verbal score did B get. All right, this is just accuracy data. What do you think verbal scores A and what were the verbal scores that A and B received? 10 mistakes. You can see where the mistakes were made. And I can zoom it in a bit more just to really make this easy. Okay. A34, B41. A few more. A38, all right. B got 40, A35, all right. Identical accuracy. And tell me why. Why do you think the scores are that way? Just to tell you, just add some context, a verbal score of 28 is 50th percentile, a verbal score of 38 is 85th percentile, a verbal score of 35 is about 70th percentile, a verbal score of 40 is 91st percentile. Okay, Lorenzo says B has more accuracy, the accuracy B had was higher early on, so those are the scores. Good. So we have a range of scores. Anirudh, I would say probably is I would say the closest of all of this. Let's kind of look at the actual data. These are their actual scores. Both A and B are the same students. Okay. A, the same thing over here, had a verbal score of 28. This was A. His verbal score was 28. And let's see, am I at the smallest? Yes. And again, you can see his subsection performance over here. Did really, really poorly in reading comprehension. The same guy in about a month was the B was the same guy as A. His name is Prakash, and you can watch a success story on our YouTube channel. But essentially, same guy got a verbal score of 38 over here. But what do you notice when you compare these two? When you compare these two, 28 versus 38, and I will just make it slightly bigger. What do you observe? What caused that improvement? Let's zoom this in. What caused that improvement? Identical mistakes, but what caused that improvement? RC. What else? RC doesn't have more weight. RC caused that improvement. RC has the same weight as SC, CR, and RC. SC and CR. He focused on RC. So he looked at this and he said, hey, this is really bad. So he focused on this, improved on that. Then he said, hey, I have an opportunity to improve SC. He improved on that. And these two things caused a 10-point improvement, got him to that score of 730. His quant score across the attempts was similar. Now, one of the other things that you would notice over here, do you see the timing piece at the bottom? What do you observe from the timing piece? I'm going to zoom it in. His timing, even though he did really well in RC over here, hasn't changed a whole lot. He answered much more difficult questions in RC, and the timing more or less remained the same. In sentence correction, he answered more difficult questions correctly. He improved from that 72nd percentile here to that 91st percentile. His timing more or less remained the same. Okay. That's what happens when you focus on learning, when you focus on refinement. He never focused on timing. If you watch his debrief and Pile, you can send the video interview. What you're going to find is that his timing, he never focused on improving his timing. He focused on learning the process, because that's what was the feedback that was given to him by our team based on his first attempt. Okay. Let's go back. Let's zoom out once again. We do another case study. Again, A and B over here. 11 mistakes with A, 7 mistakes with B. What do you think? Again, verbal section. What do you think the scores are? Verbal scores. What do you think his verbal scores are? Let's get some responses. Are you guys scared to guess now? Not sure, but still, take a guess. I mean, this could be you. Okay, A32, B27, 3038, okay. V30 for A and B, V40, good. You can't say one, you have to say both, Prabhakaran. All right, A36. So what I really see, the two kinds of people over here. One is who believes that, hey, he did really well in A over here, he must have done better. And there are people who really say, hey, he made fewer mistakes, B must be better. Okay, so a couple of you are very close, I would say. Let me just tell you who's probably the closest here. I would say Lack Tutor is very close. Samarth is very close. This guy, probably one of the most popular debrief of October on GMAT Club. His ESRs are there on GMAT Club. A was a 34, B was a 42. This was a 700 attempt. This was a 770. Okay, 42 is 96th percentile. Okay, now here's the beauty of this. What matters on the GMAT is not how many questions you get right, because 7 versus 11 is not what caused these scores. What matters is the difficulty level of questions that you get right. Okay, let's kind of look at subsectional abilities for both these attempts. What do you see over here? By the way, the first thing, and thank you, Abhijit. But the first thing that you really see when you look at these subsectional abilities, when you looked at their attempts through the lens of accuracy, they seem very similar. It was very difficult to decide who did better. But when you look at through the lens of ability, you can really see one is clearly better than the other, right? When you look through that ability lens, one seems to be way better than the other. I mean, this, no doubt, this guy. Yes, big improvement in CR from that 39th percentile to that 94th percentile. Really big improvement in SC as well. Okay. So, any guess as to how long did this improvement take? And if you've clicked on the link, you probably know how long this improvement took. But how many hours did it take? 3 weeks. 3 weeks was all that it took. In fact, if you go over here, I think, no, not this is the one that I shared where someone was blaming timing. But if you go to the bottom of the page, you go over here, you can really see this part and see this improvement took 3 weeks. The reason why it took 3 weeks, and you can see this 3 weeks later, the score improved to 770. Now, the reason it took 3 weeks was because he precisely knew where to focus his energy on. I was very, very clear. This is where I'm going to focus my energy. About 50 hours, yes, Stephen. That's the amount of time it took him. And again, that's the value an ESR provides. It tells you where you need to focus your energy on. And you guys can see how once you do that, once you understand the ability and the stage of learning, you know how to study it. And just to go about that, let's see if we can go and go into Jim's account. Actually, I believe that was his email address. Let's see if I can log in as him. So when he got that score, he focused his energy on critical reasoning. And one of the things that you would notice that he did over here was he spent a lot of time on building that foundation. He got that CR score. It was really low. He knew he had to read all the concepts again. He knew that he had to excel on them, and that's what he did. What you see over here is really good times, good scores, good time spent. Really good time spent. And he built that foundation, and then he carried on with that foundation. Now, he did score poorly in some files over here, as you can see. But what he did was he did revise those, and because of which, the next point, he actually improved. And so on and so forth. Okay. So, again, when you get data, you know where to focus your energy on. At that point in time, as you channelize that energy, you see progress happen a lot faster. And you can see the same thing in his Scholaranium to a good degree, where he practiced a decent amount of Scholaranium and good accuracy in medium, really good accuracy in easy, but in hard, he improved that to close to 60%, which is what we recommend if you want to hit that 80th to 90th percentile in any subsection. Okay, so again, you have a starting point. You can track your improvement. Once you track your improvement properly, that ending point becomes more or less certain. Okay, let's do another case study. Now, this is, remember the guy on the right, and let's call him A and B, A, B. B is the same guy as the first case study, V28 guy. You have the verbal score for B, all right? And you have A over here. Now, 9 mistakes, 10 mistakes. What do you think A's verbal score is given what B has? For hard questions, Prabhakaran, and again, if you truly want it, it's about 60% accuracy, gets you to that 80th percentile. Consistently. And again, this is based on our scholarly name data. If B is, now coming back to this, if B is V28, what is A? What is A's verbal score? B is V28. I'm telling you, you don't have to guess B. That's a fact. Okay, V34. Now, who are the people who said first 10 matter or first questions matter more? Because if first questions matter more, B should be higher than A, right? B has done much better in block 2 than A has. All right, any other guesses? Okay. Would you be shocked if I said A, V40, 91st percentile? Would that be shocking? Okay. V40. Lorenzo, the statement that you made is absolutely the takeaway that I want you to have. When it comes to the GMAT, these things, they don't matter as much. What matters is the difficulty level on which you make mistakes. Difficulty level. If you look at these two guys, 10 mistakes, 9 mistakes, they're very, very similar. But one is a 50th percentile guy, the other is a 90th percentile guy. Why? Because the difficulty level on which this guy made mistakes, they were much more difficult questions. Okay, here is his ESR. Same there, same guy. You can see his ESR over here. And coming back to this point, it is about those subsectional abilities. And by the way, if you guys want to download his ESR, you guys can. I'm going to show you. It's on Share GMAT Experience. So this is all something which is there in public domain. He's our student too, by the way. Again, same mistakes, but the mistakes that he's making, look at this part over here. He is making mistakes on difficult questions. He's making mistakes on difficult questions. This trend plot is really beautiful. The GMAT allows you to make mistakes as long as you can prove to the test you have the requisite ability. Okay. When it comes to the GMAT, focus on studying to build ability. Don't worry about timing. I mean, you saw that other case study where the first one that we did, timing impacted the first block by 2 points. Here, you don't build ability. The delta in scores is 12 points. Same accuracy. Okay. Now, the interesting piece over here. So, the thing that I want you to take away from this in all of this is And let's go back over here. That 90%, in 90% of the cases, when you get your ESR, your GMAT score is limited by your lack of ability. It is not limited by timing. Okay, so stop blaming timing, stop blaming accuracy for that low GMAT score. Even when it is limited by timing, you're going to find one thing or two things. One is that on the verbal side, you'd be on the V34 to V38 or even V40 range or V34 plus essentially. So not low scores, but in the 70th percentile or higher. The second thing is the impact of timing in a majority of cases would be 2 to 3 points. At the most, no more. But that impact of ability, it can be 12 to 15 points on that scale of 60. So for God's sake, don't go for timing. And again, one of the things which is there is the people who really say, hey, you should study using a method and solve questions using a method using which you can solve questions quickly. Because supposedly there is a myth that given enough time, anyone can answer a question of any difficulty correctly. No, it does not happen. If it's a difficult question you don't have the ability to answer, I'll give you 5 minutes, you will not be able to answer that. We've done those experiments. Okay, so let's kind of take a look at an ESR, and let's go into case studies over here, in which timing truly is limiting. Okay, this is an ESR where timing is truly limiting the student's ability. And I'm going to show you how do we infer that timing is limited. So that this guy's ability is limited by timing. First thing, it's at this point, which is where timing starts to play a role. But when you look at this over here, this plot where his accuracy is really good. And let's see if I can reduce the thickness. When you look at this plot, really good accuracy over here, but accuracy tanks in these two blocks. It's a timing seems to be the issue. Otherwise, what would cause this precipitation of accuracy? And that's especially because the difficulty level in block 2 is very similar to what is there in block 3. And that's when you go to that timing analysis and say, hey, this guy had a lot more time. Let me just make this slightly thicker. This guy had a lot more time in block 2. He started to panic in block 3. And block 4, he practically had 0 time left. So block 4, I'm going to completely discard. Block 3, I'm going to discard to a certain degree. And in this case, I would say this guy lost 3 points, so minus 3 points because of timing. However, you see certain characteristics. When the guy had time, so your ability is limited by timing. If when you have time, you actually perform well, and when time starts to go bad, your ability or your performance drops drastically. That's when you say, I'm limited by timing. But again, that's only going to start to happen in the 70th percentile onwards. If you are at a V28, despite spending enough time in block 1 and block 2, you never had ability to begin with. Even if I gave you 10 more minutes, you wouldn't have gone any further. Does that make sense? And Andrew, I'm going to answer that question. There are a few things that matter when it comes to when you hit that V40 range. And we're going to actually take a case study just now. Okay. Again, let's kind of talk about what have we learned so far. What's the most important thing when it comes to looking at your ESR? Which section do we look at? Kana, we're going to take that case study just now. So which section would you look at in the ESR when you get it? What's the most important data point, other than, of course, your quant and verbal score, which, by the way, you don't need your ESR for? And thank you, Mohit. What's the first thing you're going to look at? The first is, let's get this over here. You're going to look at your subsectional abilities. Okay. You get your subsectional abilities, and then you really determine, based on which subsection you are in, what is the corrective action. And I'm going to talk a bit more about that. The second thing you're going to determine if your verbal score is above V34 or V35, and if your quant score is above Q45, is, has timing impacted my ability? Combining these two pieces of information, you're going to create your improvement plan. And execute on it. By the way, our GMAT planner does that for you. It takes about 4 minutes to do that. And it gives you a really precise estimate. Now, let's talk about those stages of learning. The first stage of learning is learn concepts and methods. If your ability score is less than 50 percentile, that's the stage that you are in. That's where you need to go back, you need to learn methods. The second stage is what we call as cement methods. If your ability score is, upwards of 50 percentile to 70 percentile, or 70 to 75, that's what you do, cement method, which means you know the concepts, you somehow know the methods, you need to cement those methods, you need to make sure you get good enough that you hit that 70th or 75th percentile. And the third stage is refine to perfection. And this is where you go from that 75 plus to 90. There was a question right now, which is, hey, I scored a V36, I'm going to focus on timing. Again, when you think of a verbal score, one thing that your takeaway should have been is, don't worry about that verbal score. Look at the subsectional level. Maybe with a V36, one of your subsections still puts you over here. I mean, look at Jim's case. That's the classical example. In Jim's case, over here, the guy was at V34. And let me just zoom it in. But his critical reasoning was at 39 percentile. He had to go back, learn the concepts. It took him 1 week to do that. But because he put his energy on the right kind of things, he was able to improve that to 94th percentile. So don't just look at V36 and say, I'm going to focus on my time management strategy. What constitutes that V36 is really important. And let me see who that was. Ellie, does that make sense? All right. And that's really important. Now, if that's the case, what should your mock test give you? If this is what you take out of an ESR, if you want to gauge your progress, what should your mock test provide to you? Subsectional abilities, right? That is what your mocks should provide to you. Let me actually move forward. I'm gonna just move the camera a bit over here. Because if you get your subsectional abilities, what you're gonna find is that you are able to create that improvement plan. So let's take a case study of a student and kind of see how would we build our improvement plan. And this is one of our students. He's our current student, and this guy has taken a few mock tests, and you can really see when those mock tests are taken. And this is what I'm going to show are Sigma X mocks. These are mocks that I was telling you about, that we announced, that we released in May of this year, that use a very similar scoring architecture to what the actual GMAT uses. We have 3 subsectional engines in there on the verbal side and 2 on the quant side, and they give you diagnostics. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at his scores and analyze. And he took all the 5 mocks, so we know what happened. So what's the first thing that you see over here? What is the first thing that you see? And Andrew, when referring to ability, I am not talking about intelligence. I'm talking about your ability to execute. All the people, majority of the folks who get a V28 are just as intelligent as those who get a V40. GMAT's not a test of intelligence. It's a test of your ability to follow a methodical approach. Okay. So the first thing that you see here is, okay, Q47, V35. And since we've been talking about verbal, to keep things consistent, we're going to look at this and say, hey, what is the makeup of his verbal section? And the moment I look at this, I see, okay, his V35 is composed of his abilities in sentence correction, which is a 73rd percentile, in critical reasoning, which is 81st percentile, and in reading comprehension, which is a 60th percentile over here. So essentially, reading comprehension is what seems to be impacting his ability score or his overall verbal score the most. Now, when you look at his target scores over here, you can see he is targeting a 90th percentile in each of these subsections. So you can really see the delta over here as well. Okay. So let's see, is his score limited by timing? So what we do is we go there, we go into a progression block and let it load. Let's just go back to the 680 score, and let's analyze the verbal section once again. Let's go into the progression plot. Yes. So progression plot, the first thing that I look for is how much time is he taking in each of the blocks over here. And remember, the first 2 blocks have 10 questions. The last 2 blocks have 8 questions. So when I look at this, and this, and I say, it seems he has ample time in each of the subsections, he doesn't seem to be timing limited. The second piece that I get from here, and this is all the subsections combined, is in the last subsection where his accuracy is the lowest, what you see over here is the difficulty. As the difficulty level goes up, his accuracy goes down. So at the highest difficulty level is when he made most mistakes, even though he had ample time. He had approximately 2 minutes per question, okay? Or as you can really see, a minute 45. So not timing limited, but let's kind of look at each and every subsection and see, is he truly limited by ability or is he limited by timing? So when I go into sentence correction, this is a sentence correction plot. Now, and this is something that only we provide, the actual ESR doesn't provide that. And the way you read this is, you see the difficulty level over here, you see the accuracy at that difficulty over here. And again, these are 3 questions, and you can see how long he took to answer those questions. So what you see is, when the difficulty level is medium, you can answer every question correctly. The difficulty level goes to medium hard. This is medium hard over here. You can answer 2 out of 3. So maybe one is a careless mistake, maybe a concept that he did not know. Then as the difficulty level turned hard, in this case, he was able to answer all the questions, but as it maintained hard, as it remained hard, over here, despite spending time, his accuracy was 0. So he truly is ability limited. That's the only judgment we are making here. Am I limited by ability? Am I limited by time? Time, I am not limited. There's ample time here. A minute 46 is ample time. I am truly ability limited here. That's what my takeaway in SC is. Okay. Now, out of the 12 questions, he made 4 mistakes. So he got 8 out of 12. He still got 73rd percentile. Why? That's the beauty of ability. You can make mistakes, you can still get to that score. Okay. Sigma X questions are not pulled from Scholaranium. No, they have their own question bank, so you can't mess them up. Then let's go to CR. Let's do the same thing. CR, he was almost he was on the upper 80s. Let's kind of do the same analysis. Again, medium questions, did well. Medium hard questions, doing well. Timing is pretty okay, is not wasting time either. Hard questions, made a mistake, but then hard questions again did well. So I mean, he's in that 80th percentile. Estimate seems to be pretty okay. And essentially, he needs to focus on refinement. He doesn't need to go and learn things from scratch. He is not timing limited, as we can really see even in block 3 and block 4. He has ample time to answer questions. Okay. When we go to RC, which was his worst subsection, okay, that's where things get interesting. Medium questions, he can answer them correctly. As questions become medium hard, he starts to make mistakes, which is why he got medium hard questions again. He did slightly better over here. So questions that the next set of questions that he received were hard questions, and he made more mistakes despite spending ample time over here. I mean, 5 minutes per question, 5 minutes for an RC, that's ample time. Every question that he made a mistake on, he spent 2 minutes on it. Okay. So RC was truly limiting for him. Now watch what happens when you get these insights and when you focus. So this guy took this was mock 3 that we were analyzing over here. Okay. And this was mock 3 that we were analyzing, which was on 11th of November. He started focusing on RC. He took another mock 5 days later. Let's analyze that. Look at that improvement in his verbal score, but as he analyzes verbal score, look at the improvement in RC. Because he focused his energy on RC, look at how he was able to improve to that 95th percentile. Another thing that you would notice is his CR went down because he did not focus on CR, and that's what happens. But the point really is he can get to that 95th percentile by just focusing, and he can do that in about 5 days. Now let's analyze his performance over here in the progression block, which is probably the most important block. And what you see right off the bat is, as things get difficult, the accuracy doesn't drop. And you see why that is the case. Let's look at RC. Again, this is the RC attempt, 95th percentile. Just one mistake. And that's what focus and focusing on the right methods can do. Okay. So when you have focus, you can see hard RCs, all correct. Time to answer questions, not as bad. 6 minutes per RC. Very good for hard RC passages. On the CR side, because he didn't practice these 5 days, you can see he made some mistakes, careless mistakes as questions got medium hard, and again got medium questions, got all of them correctly, got medium hard questions, and had ample time, answered all of them correctly. But because of these careless mistakes, because he did not revise CR during those days, his CR suffered. Had he done some revision in CR, had he gotten that V39 or a 39 on CR or CR 39, his overall score would have been V42 rather than V39, which is what he got, and he probably would have been at a 740. But the neat thing about this is, with this V39 score, this guy can be really confident that in a few days he can get to a V42. All right, let's kind of look at what you were saying, Venkatesh, in the last block. Progression view, 88% and 75%. Yeah. What was your question? So overall, when it comes to the GMAT, what matters is ability. What is ability? Ability is essentially whether you can answer difficult questions correctly or not. That's all there is to it. The first few questions, hey, timing and all of those things, they're not as important. That's the first takeaway. The second takeaway is, when you get that ability score, understand which stage of learning you are in. And based on the stage of learning you are in, focus on either learning the content or cementing the methods or refining to perfection. This is 1, this is 2, and this is 3. Okay. And the third takeaway that I want you to have is, when you focus on the right stage of learning and you get the right metrics, what you find is that improvement happens in days. It doesn't take weeks. It doesn't take months. Okay. Now, the same guy that we were talking about, if you look at his EGMAT portal, let's go and look at his EGMAT portal over here. What you're going to find is, this is his SC course. There are 87 points of feedback over here that he has received, and his average score is pretty high, 86% in concept and practice quizzes. Okay, when you have these average scores, and you can see these things over here, when you have such high scores here, you can be very certain that what you're learning that properly. You're learning not just the concepts, you're understanding the concepts, you're learning the methods properly. I mean, 87 points of feedback just during, and this part is just during this stage of sentence correction, and you have 87 points of feedback over there, you have very little. I mean, this is actually way more than a private tutor would give you, but one thing that it does is you're very certain that you've learned things well. All right, any question that I can answer, any myth that I can debunk, or any concern that I can address over here. This is all that I had. And again, if you want to take a Sigma X mock, Pyle would be happy to share a link to the same. All right. If there are no other questions, then there are no other questions, and in that case, I'd like to thank you guys for joining me in this webinar. We have some upcoming webinars this weekend, one on critical reasoning, the other one on algebra. Do join them. Kanha, send us your ESR if you've been stuck at V30 or V49, and we can help you improve. Also, take a look at Jim's success story. Look at which subsectional abilities are limiting you. All right. And Payal, if you could share the link to a Sigma X mock test, that would be helpful. Let me actually see if I can. All right. Thank you, Abhijit. Thank you very much. And again, if you have any questions, you can just write to me at rajat@e-gmat.com. Let me actually do that. Let me say that. All right, bye-bye, and have a good day.